Section 10 of the Best Short Stories of 1917. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Rel. The Best Short Stories of 1917 by Various. The Emperor of Elam by H.G. Dwight. Part 3. Tribus. As Gaston very truly observed, there are moments in Persia when even the most experienced chauffeur is capable of an emotion, and an unusual number of such moments enlivened for Gaston and his companions their journey up the Abides. Indeed, Matthews asked himself more than once why he had chosen so doubtful a road to Disful, when he might so much more easily have ridden there, and at night. It certainly was not beautiful, that river of brass zigzagging out of sight of its empty hinterland. Very seldom did anything so visible as a palm lift itself against the blinding Persian blue. Konar trees were commoner, their dense round masses sometimes shading a whitewashed tomb or a black tent. Once or twice at sight of the motorboat of Elam, a native canoe took refuge at the mouth of one of the gullies that scarred the bank like sun cracks. Generally, however, there was nothing to be seen between the water and the sky but two yellow walls of clay, topped by endless thickets of tamarisk and nameless scrub. Matthews wondered, disappointed, whether a jungle looked like that, and if some black-maned lion walked more softly in it, or slept less soundly, hearing the pant of the unknown creature in the river. But there was no lack of more immediate lions in the path. The sun, for one thing, as the Brazilian had predicted, proved a torment against which double awnings faced with green were of small avail. Then the treacheries of a crooked and constantly shallowing channel needed all the attention the travelers could spare, and the rapids of Calabunda, where a rocky island flanked by two reefs threatened to bar any further progress, afforded the liveliest moments of their day. The end of that day, nevertheless, found our sightseers smoking cigarettes in Shere Ali Khan's garden at Disful and listening to the camel bells that jingled from the direction of certain tall, black, pointed arches straddling the dark river. When Matthews looked at those arches by sunlight, and at the queer old flat-topped yellow town visible through them, he regretted that he had made up his mind to continue his journey so soon. However, he was coming back, so he packed off Gaston and the Bakhtiari to Chalalie, where they and their motorboat belonged, and he himself, with his servant Abbas and the Carvadar, of whom they hired horses, set out at nightfall for the mountain citadel of Bala Bala. For there the great Salman Taka Khan, chieftain of the lower Lurs, otherwise known as the Father of Swords, was to celebrate as became a redoubtable vassal of a remote and youthful suzerain the coronation of Ahmed Shah Qajar. It was nearly morning again when, after a last scramble up a trough of rocks and gravel too steep for riding, the small cavalcade reached a plateau in the shadow of still loftier elevations. Here they were greeted by a furious barking of dogs. Indeed, it quickly became necessary to organize a defense of whips and stones against the guardians of that high plateau. The uproar soon brought a shout out of the darkness. The Carvadar shouted back, and after a long-distance colloquy there appeared a figure crowned by the tall kulla of the Brazilian's boatman, who drove the dogs away. The dialect in which he spoke proved incomprehensible to Matthews. Luckily it was not altogether so to Abbas, that underling long resigned to the eccentricities of the Ferengi, whose accomplishments included even a sketchy knowledge of his master's tongue. It appeared that the law of Bala Bala forbade the door of the Father of Swords to open before sunrise. But the tall, hatted one offered the visitor the provisional hospitality of a black tent, of a refreshing drink of goat's buttermilk, and of a comfortable felt whereon to stretch cramped legs. When Matthews returned to consciousness, he first became aware of a blinding oblong of light in the dark wall of the tent. He then made out a circle of pontifical black hats, staring at him, his fair hair, and his indecently close-fitting clothes, in the silence of unutterable curiosity. It made him think, for a bewildered instant, that he was back on the barge he had met in the river. As for the black hats, what astonished them not least was the stranger's immediate demand for water, and his evident dissatisfaction with the quantity of it they brought him. There happily proved to be no lack of this commodity, as Matthews's ears had told him. He was not long in pursuing the sound into the open, where he found himself at the edge of a village of black tents, pitched in a grassy hollow between two heights. The nearer and lower was a detached cone of rock, crowned by a rude castle. The other peak, not quite so precipitous, afforded foothold for scattered scrub oaks, and for a host of slowly moving sheep and goats. Between them the plateau looked down on two sides into two converging valleys, and the clear air was full of the noise of a brook that cascaded between the scrub oaks of the higher mountain, raced past the tents, and plunged out of sight in the narrower gorge. "Ripping!" pronounced Matthews genially to his black-hatted gallery. He was less genial about the persistence of the gallery, rapidly increased by recruits from the black tents, and dogging him through every detail of his toilet. But he was rescued at last by Abbas and an old lure, who, putting his two hands to the edge of his black cap, saluted him in the name of the Father of Swords. The lure then led the way to a trail that zigzagged up the lower part of the rocky cone. He explained the quantity of loose boulders obstructing the path by saying that they had been left there to roll down on whomever should visit the Father of Swords without an invitation. That such an enterprise would not be too simple became more evident when the path turned into a cave. Here another lure was waiting with candles. He gave one each to the newcomers, leading the way to a low door in the rock. This was opened by an individual in a long red coat of ceremony, carrying a heavy silver mace, who gave Matthews the customary salutation of peace, and bowed him into an irregular court. An infinity of doors opened out of it, chiefly of the stables, the old man said, pointing out a big white mule or two of the famous breed of Bala Bala. Thence the visitor was led up a steep stone stair to a terrace, giving entrance upon a corridor and another, narrower stone stair. From its prodigiously high steps he emerged into a hall, carpeted with felt. At this point the lures took off their shoes. Matthews followed suit, being then ushered into what was evidently a room of state. It contained no furniture, to be sure, save for the handsome rugs on the floor. The room did not look bare, however, for its lines were broken by a deep alcove and by a continuous succession of niches. Between and about the niches the walls were decorated with plaster reliefs of flowers and arabesques. Matthews wondered if the black hats were capable of that. But what chiefly caught his eye was the terrace opening out of the room, and the stupendous view. The terrace hung over a green chasm where the two converging gorges met at the foot of the crag of Bala Bala. Matthews looked down as from the prow of a ship into the tumbled country below him, through which a river flashed sinuously toward the faraway haze of the plains. The sound of water filling the still clear air, the brilliance of the morning light, the wildness and remoteness of that mountain eyrie, so different from anything he had yet seen, added a last strangeness to the impressions of which the young man had been having so many. What a pity to spoil it with the railroad, he could not help thinking, as he leaned over the parapet of the terrace. "Sahib!" suddenly whispered Abbas behind him. Matthews turned and saw in the doorway of the terrace a personage who could be none other than his host. In place of the kola of his people, this personage wore a great white turban touched with gold. The loose blue abba enveloping his ample figure was also embroidered with gold. Not the least striking detail of his appearance, however, was his beard, which had a pronounced tendency toward scarlet. His nails were likewise reddened with henna, reminding Matthews that the hands belonging to the nails were rumored to bear even more sinister stains, and the bottomless black eyes peering out from under the white turban lent surprising credibility to such rumors. But there was no lack of graciousness in the gestures with which those famous hands saluted the visitor and pointed him to a seat of honor on the rug beside the Father of Swords. The Father of Swords, furthermore, pronounced his heart uplifted to receive a friend of Gans Sahib, that prince among the merchants of Schuster. Yet he did not hesitate to express a certain surprise at discovering in the friend of the prince among the merchants of Schuster one still in the flower of youth, who at the same time exhibited the features of good fortune and the lineaments of prudence. And he inquired as to what sorrow had led one so young to fold the carpet of enjoyment and wander so far from his parents. Matthews, disdaining the promptings of Abbas, who stood apart like a statue of obsequiousness, each hand stuck into the sleeve of the other, responded as best he might. In the meantime, tea and candies were served by a black hat on bended knee, who also produced a pair of ornate pipes. The Father of Swords marveled that Matthews should have abandoned the delights of Schuster in order to witness his poor celebrations of the morrow in honor of the coronation. And had he felt no fear of robbers during his long night ride from Disful? But what robbers were there to fear, protested Matthews, in the very shadow of Bala Bala? At that the Father of Swords began to make bitter complaint of the afflictions Allah had laid upon him, taking his text from these lines of Shadi, quote, "If thou tellest the sorrows of thy heart, let it be to him in whose countenance thou mayest be assured of prompt consolation." Unquote. The world, he declared, was fallen into disorder like the hair of an Ethiopian. Within the city wall was a people well disposed as angels, without a band of tigers. After which he asked if the young Ferengi were of the company of those who dug for the poisoned water of Bakhtiari land, or whether perchance he were of the people of the chain. These figures of speech would have been incomprehensible to Matthews if Abbas had not hinted something about oil rigs. He accordingly confessed that he had nothing to do with either of the two enterprises. The Father of Swords then expatiated on those who caused the lures to seize the hand of amazement with the teeth of chagrin, by dragging through their valleys a long chain, as if they meant to take prisoners. These unwelcome Ferengis were also to be known by certain strange inventions on 3 legs, into which they would gaze by the hour. Were they warriors, threatening devastation? Or were they magicians, spying into the future and laying a spell upon the people of Luristan? Their account of themselves the Father of Swords found far from satisfactory, claiming as they did that they proposed to build a road of iron, whereby it would be possible for a man to go from Disful to Khorramabad in 1 day. For the rest, what business had the people of Disful, too many of whom were Arabs, in Khorramabad, a city of lures? let the men of Disful remain in Disful, and those of Kurumabad continue where they were born. As for him, his white mules needed no road of iron to carry him about his affairs. Matthews, recalling his own thoughts as he leaned over the parapet of the terrace, spoke consolingly to the Father of Swords concerning the people of the chain. The Father of Swords listened to him, drawing meditatively at his water-pipe. He thereupon inquired if Matthews were acquainted with another friend of the prince among the merchants of Schuster, himself a Ferengi by birth, though recently persuaded of the truths of Islam, and not like this visitor of good omen in the bloom of youth, but bearded and hardened in battles, bearing the scars of them on his face. Matthews began to go over in his mind the short list of Europeans he had met on the Karun, till suddenly he bethought him of that extraordinary barge he had encountered. Could it be only a couple of days ago? "Mahin Sahib?" he asked. "I know him. If he is the one who travels in the river in a mahala, not like other mahalas, rowed by lures." "That is a musk which discloses itself by its scent, and not what the perfumers impose upon us," quoted the Father of Swords. "This man," he continued, "our friend and the friend of our friend, warned me that they of the chain are sons of oppression, destined to bring misfortune to the lures. Surely my soul is tightened, not knowing whom I may believe." "Rumbounder," said Matthews to himself, as his mind went back to the already mythic barge, and its fantastic oarsmen from these very mountains, and its antique hunting, history-citing master from oversea, who quoted the book of Genesis, and who carried mysterious passengers with nose jewels. But our not too articulate young man was less prompt about what he should say aloud. He began to find more in this interview than he had expected. He was tickled at his host's flowery forms of speech, and after all rather sympathized with the suspicious old ruffian. Yet it was not for him to fail in loyalty toward the "people of the chain." Several of them he knew, as it happened, and they had delighted him with their wild yarns of surveying in Luristan, so he managed no more than to achieve an appearance of slightly offended dignity. Considering which, out of those opaque eyes, the Father of Swords clapped those famous hands and commanded a responsive black hat to bring him his green chest. At that Matthews pricked up interested ears indeed. The chest, however, when set down in front of the Father of Swords, proved to be nothing at all like the one out of which the Brazilian had taken his gold anklet. It was quite small and painted green, though quaintly enough provided with triple locks of beaten iron. The Father of Swords unlocked them deliberately, withdrew from an inner compartment a round tin case, and from that a roll of parchment, which he pressed to his lips with infinite solemnity. He then handed it to Matthews. He was one, our not too articulate young man, to take things as they came and not to require, even east of Suez, the spice of romance with his daily bread. His last days, moreover, had been too crowded for him to ruminate over their taste. But it was not every day that he squatted on the same rug with a scarlet-bearded old cutthroat of a mountain chief. So it was that his more or less casual lark visibly took on, from the perspective of this castle in Luristan, as he unrolled a gaudy emblazonment of eagles at the top of the parchment, a new and curious color. For below the eagle he came upon what he darkly made out to be a species of treaty, inscribed neither in the Arabic nor in the Roman, but in the German character, between the Father of Swords and a more notorious warlord, and below that was signed, sealed, and imposingly paraffed the signature of one Julius Mahim, which was indeed a novel aspect for a Brazilian, however versatile, to reveal. He permitted himself, did Guy Matthews, a smile. "You do not kiss it," observed the father of swords. "In my country," Matthews began. "But it is, may I be your sacrifice?" interrupted the father of swords. "A letter from the Shah of the Shahs of the Ferengis." It was evident that he was both impressed and certain of impressing his hearer. "He has promised eternal peace to me and to my people." The Englishman and Matthews permitted him a second smile. "The father of swords," he said, "speaks a word which I do not understand. I am a Ferengi, but I have never heard of a Shah of the Shahs of the Ferengis. In the house of Islam, are there not many who rule? In Tehran, for instance, there is the young Ahmed Shah. Then among the Bakhtiaris there is an Ilkhani. At Mohamera there is the Sheikh of the Kaab, and in the valleys of Pashtika none is above the father of swords. I do not forget, either, the Emirs of Mecca and Afghanistan, or the Sultan in Stamboul, and among them what Ferengi shall say who is the greatest? And so it is in Ferengistan. Yet as for this paper, it is written in the tongue of a king smaller than the one whose subject I am, whose crown has been worn by few fathers. But the name at the bottom of the paper is not his. It is not even a name known to the Ferengis when they speak among themselves of the great of their lands. Where did you see him?" The father of swords stroked his scarlet beard, looking at his young visitor with more of a gleam in the dull black of his eyes than Matthews had yet noticed. "Truly is it said, fix not thy heart on what is transitory, for the Tigris will continue to flow through Baghdad after the race of caliphs is extinct." You make it clear to me that you are of the people of the chain. "If I were the people of the chain," protested Matthews, "there is no reason why I should hide it. The people of the chain do not steal secretly through the valleys of Pushtika, telling the lures lies and giving them papers in the night. I am not one of the people of the chain. But the king of the people of the chain is also my king, and he is a great king, lord of many lands and many seas, who has no need of secret messengers, hustlers, and scullions of whom no one has heard, to persuade strangers of his greatness." "Your words do not persuade me," cried the father of swords. "A wise man is like a jar in the house of the apothecary, silent but full of virtues. If the king who sent me this letter has such hostlers and such scullions, how great must be his khans and viziers? And why do the Turks trust him? Why do the other Ferengis allow his ships in Bushir and Basra? Or why do not the people of the chain better prove the character of their lord? But the hand of liberality is stronger than the arm of power. This king, against whom you speak, heard me draw the sigh of affliction from the bosom of uncertainty. He deigned to regard me with the eye of patronage, sending me good words and promises of peace and friendship. He will not permit the house of Islam to be troubled. From many we have heard it." "Ah!" exclaimed Matthews. "Now I understand why you have not kept your promises to the people of the chain. and he rubbed his thumb against his forefinger in the gesture of the East that signifies the payment of money. "Why not?" demanded the Father of Swords angrily. "The duty of a king is munificence, or why should there be a way to pass through my mountains? Has it ever been said of the Lord that he stepped back before a stranger? That is for the Shah in Tehran, who has become the servant of the Russian. Let the people of the chain learn that my neck does not know how to bow. And what guest are you to sprinkle my sore with the salt of harsh words? A boy who comes here no one knows why, on hired horses, with only one follower to attend him." Matthews flushed. "Solomon Taka Khan," he retorted, "it is true that I come to you humbly and without a beard, and your beard is already white, and you can call out 30,000 men to follow you. Yet a piece of gold will make you believe a lie, and I swear to you that whether I give you back this paper to put in your chest, or whether I spit on it and tear it in pieces and throw it to the wind of that valley, it is one." To which the Father of Swords made emphatic enough rejoinder by snatching the parchment away, rising to his feet, and striding out of the room without a word. End of section 10.